Thank you, Shelby and Liz. In my opinion, the person who is leading the charge in redefining what the mental models we need in order to design and operate the massively complex socio-technical systems that we all live in every day is John Allspaw. Certainly, almost everyone in the DevOps community is familiar with his decades of work. In fact, if there were a starting gun to the DevOps movement, it was likely the famous talk that he gave at the Velocity Conference in 2009 with Paul Hammond, where they talked about doing 10 deploys a day, every day, as a part of their work at Flickr. I finally got to meet John Allspaw in person at the DevOps Days Mountain View in 2010. It's a meeting that I'll never forget, and over the years I've learned so much from him. He got his master's degree from Lund University back when he was CTO at Etsy. His advisors included the famous Dr. Richard Cook and Dr. Sidney Dekker and Dr. David Woods, famous for their contributions to the safety and resilience engineering community. We all talk about our desire to create learning organizations, and that is why I find John's work so intriguing, because he believes that by observing how organizations respond to incidents, we can gain incredible clues on whether and to what degree organizations are actually learning. Here's John.
Thanks. So my goal today is to describe one of the most effective ways we can learn from incidents. It might not be intuitive, but at the same time, it might be very intuitive, just unclear on how to do it. Before we jump into it, I want to start out by giving you the summary. I want to give you the conclusion of this talk before I start. So here's a too long, didn't watch slide. The main gist of what I want to get across. The first is learning is never not happening. It is what humans do. It's an integral human activity. Second is that it requires remembering. Learning and remembering are inextricably linked. That means that learning from incidents effectively means discovering and highlighting aspects and qualities of the story of an incident that makes it more likely to be remembered. So what are those aspects? Well, they're elements of surprise and difficulty, misunderstandings, dilemmas, paradoxes. This is what makes for good stories. This is what makes for stories that can be remembered. If you can remember it, it's likely that learning is going on. So something that I want to mention is that I'm using the phrase messy details in the title of this talk very deliberately. You may have heard me reference this phrase before. It's a reference to this paper, and it captures quite eloquently, in my opinion, that when it comes to work in complex domains, the details of what people do and how they do it is what matters, almost more than anything else. These details are easy to miss, and they're not often looked at closely. So that's what I mean when I say the messy details. If you haven't taken a look at this paper, I can't recommend it more highly. Just because the topic surrounds the domain of healthcare doesn't mean that it's not applicable to other domains. So I want to first start with a story from my time at Etsy, company here in Brooklyn, New York, where I am right now. I worked for a number of years. So the story of this incident is that an engineer on the job for no more than a couple of weeks made a change that brought all of Etsy.com down. And the site wasn't just slow or degraded, it was down hard. This is sort of what a typical write-up looks like about incidents. Recently hired engineer, made a change to production, blah, 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 blah. It was about an hour and 10 minutes for them to figure out what was going on and what to do. So nothing catastrophic, but nothing either. So I want to park that for a second. We'll come back to this story. Let's talk about learning in general and learning from incidents. As I mentioned before, people are always learning. The it's difficult to prevent people from learning. The question isn't whether they're learning or not learning. The question is, what are they learning, and how useful or how productive is what they're learning going to be to help them do their work in the future? The challenge isn't getting people to learn. It's about creating conditions where a couple of things can happen. We want to create conditions where people at every level of the organization have opportunities to discover new things they didn't know, or revisiting things that they thought they already knew, but either were wrong or slightly dated in their knowledge, that sort of thing. It's also about creating conditions where experts are supported in describing and teaching others, telling stories about what they know and how they know it. This is actually a lot more difficult than just getting something on the calendar and ask somebody, tell me what you know. What we know about studies of expertise is that experts are not necessarily expert at describing what makes them an expert. But rich stories are valuable. You want to create conditions where they're viewed as assets, just like any other valuable asset to the success of a business. So, mentioned before in some other talks, is that learning is not the same as fixing. Often, especially in the industry at the moment, they sometimes seem to be confused or swapped for